Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee. My name is Julia Oshwald, and I'm delighted to serve as your worship associate today, and to welcome you fully into this space. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies here. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit here. We welcome all you are bringing with you today and all your heart longs to set down. We extend a special welcome to each guest among us. We invite our guests to fill out a welcome card located in the pew rack in front of you and drop it in the offering plate later in the service. Guests may also pick up a welcome packet at the back of the sanctuary, where folks will also find hearing assist devices and braille hymnals. A fragrance-free area is located on the front right side of the first few pews. If you are a visiting family, including children or youth, after the time for all ages noted in your order of service, please join the children's recessional and head across the hall to the common room. There you will be greeted by someone who will orient you to religious education. Immediately following the service, everyone is invited for coffee and conversation in the common room. Again, my name is Julia, and you can come talk to me at the guest table there. As a way to engage at First Church, I invite everyone to explore the announcements insert for the numerous opportunities available here. In particular, let me draw your attention to a few. Our forum speaker this morning is Dr. Michael Duffy, speaking on the Center for Peacemaking, Creating a Nonviolent Social Action. Defend Civil Rights Action, the Metropolitan Milwaukee Fair Housing Council is providing an opportunity at First Church October 15th from 3 to 6 p.m. to submit comments about new ways the government will enforce the Federal Fair Housing Act. This is open to anyone in the community who wants to support fair housing. Please stop in. Song Circles with Julie Thompson begin October 29th. Experience the joy and power of singing in the oral tradition as vocalist Julie Thompson facilitates an adult circle of songs, rounds, and chants on Tuesday evenings, October 29th, November 12th, and December 3rd, from 6:45 to 8 p.m. Register for one or all 3 dates online. Monday is your deadline to donate items and events to Feast for Funds, which builds community and raises money to support our mission at First Church. Please see us at coffee hour today or submit your event or donation online. Please find more details on these and more in the announcements insert. Finally, please silence any electronic devices for the remainder of the service. Once again, I welcome you to First Church by inviting you to join me in the unison reading of our mission, which is printed in your order of service. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. I'd like to call up Dylan Duffy to light the chalice.
Our opening words this morning are by David Wagner. The piece is entitled Lost. Lost? Stand still. The trees ahead and bushes beside you are not lost. Wherever you are is called here, and you must treat it as a powerful stranger, must ask permission to know it and to be known. The forest breathes. Listen. It answers, I have made this place around you. If you leave it, you may come back again saying, here. No two trees are the same to raven, no two branches are the same to wren. If what a tree or a bush does is lost on you, you are surely lost. Stand still. The forest knows where you are. You must let it find you. The matches know we're having a fire drill today. Will you please rise in body or spirit after Alyssa gives a little information about our opening hymn?
So if Good morning. The story I have for you today is called Everybody Needs a Rock by Bert Baylor. Everybody needs a rock. I'm sorry for kids who don't have a rock for a friend. I'm sorry for the kids who only have tricycles and bicycles and horses and elephants and goldfish and three-room playhouses and fire engines and wind-up dragons and things like that. If they don't have a rock for a friend. And that's why I'm giving you my 10 rules for finding a rock. Not just any rock. I mean a special rock. The rock that you find yourself and that you keep as long as you can, and maybe even forever. If somebody says, "What's so special about that rock?" Don't tell them. I don't. Nobody is supposed to know what's special about another person's rock. All right, are you ready? Here are the rules. Rule number 1. If you can, go to a mountain made out of nothing but 100 million small, shiny, beautiful, tiny rocks. Or, if you can't, any place actually will do, even an alley, even a sandy road. Rule 2, when you're looking at rocks, don't let mothers or fathers or sisters or brothers or even best friends talk to you. You should choose a rock when everything is quiet. Don't let dogs bark at you or bees buzz at you, but if they do, don't worry. The worst thing you can do is go rock hunting when you're worried. Rule number 3, bend over. More, even more. You might have to actually sit on the ground with your head almost touching the earth. You have to look a rock straight in the eye. Otherwise, don't blame me if you can't find a good one. Rule number 4, don't get a rock that's too big. You will be sorry. It will not fit in your hand right, and it will not fit in your pocket right. A rock as big as an apple, too big. A rock as big as a horse, much too big. Rule number 5, don't choose a rock that's too small. It will only be too easy to lose, or a mouse might eat it, thinking that it is a seed. Believe me, that happened to a boy in Arizona. Rule number 6, the size must be perfect. It has to feel easy in your hand when you close your fingers over it. It has to feel jumpy in your pocket when you run. Some people touch a rock 1,000 times a day. There aren't many things that feel as good as a rock if the rock is perfect. Rule number 7, look for the perfect color. That could be sort of a pinkish gray with bits of silvery shine in it. Some rocks look brown and are actually other colors, but you only see them when you squint or when the sun is just right. Another way to see the colors in the rock is to dip it in a clear mountain stream that one is passing by. Rule number 8, the shape of the rock is up to you. There's a girl in Alaska who only likes flat rocks. Don't ask me why, I like them lumpy. The thing to remember about shapes is this: any rock looks good with 100 other rocks around it on a hill. But if your rock is going to be special, it should look good all by itself in the bathtub. Rule number 9, always sniff a rock. Yes, rocks do have their own smells. Some kids can't tell by sniffing whether a rock came from the middle of the earth. Some kids can tell by sniffing if a rock came from the middle of the earth or the ocean or a mountain or where wind and sun touched it every day for 1,000,000 years. You'll find it that grown-ups, they actually can't tell these things. Too bad for them. They just can't smell as well as kids can. Rule number 10, don't ask anyone to help you choose. I've seen a lizard pick one rock out of a desert full of rocks and go sit there alone. I've seen a snail pass by 20 rocks and spend all day getting to know the one they wanted. You have to make up your own mind. Trust yourself. You'll know. All right, those are the rules. If you can think of any more, write them down yourself. I'm going to play a game that takes me and one rock to play. I just happen to have the rock right here in my hand. The end. Please rise in body and spirit for our next hymn. It's number 1007 in the teal.
I am sorry to share with you the news of a death in our congregation. Edwin Packard Wiley, known as Ted, died peacefully after a long decline in his health on Friday, October 4th, 2019, at the age of 89. His 3 sons visited or called him during the week that he died, and one of Ted's closest friends was there the day that he died. Ted had been in hospice care for several months at East Castle. Ted first joined First Church in 1953, and he was particularly active during the Reverend John Cyrus's years of ministry. The family prefers to have no memorial service, but will plan a celebration of life in the Milwaukee community at a later date. Thus, as is our tradition in this church, whenever we have a birth, an adoption, or a death among our members, we light our candle of life. Today, in honor of Edwin Packard Wiley. Will you join me now in a time of contemplation, which will be followed by silence, followed by the seated singing of Spirit of Life. Spirit of life and love, Holy One of our being and our becoming, that which is sacred within, among, and beyond us. Announce to us our place in the community of beings. May we know our relationship to the land and the water, to the trees and the animals, to the plants and the air and the insects, to our own breath. May we know our relationship to each other, to the people of today, the people of the past. May we know our relationship to the people of the future. And may we find belonging in the community of all that is. May it be so.
When I was 27 years old, I moved back in with my mother. I had just returned to the United States after a number of years abroad, and I needed a place to crash for a while I found a job. Right at the same time I moved back to Wauwatosa, my mom was moving out of our childhood home. We had lived there since I was 5 years old. It was a gorgeous old home built in 1921, and it was filled with nearly every beautiful, informative, and tragic, and touching, and painful memory of my childhood. We all loved that house dearly, but it was becoming far too big for my mother to live in alone. So, not wanting to leave her beloved neighborhood, she decided to move to a much smaller home just 2 blocks away. And much to my mother's delight, right as she decided to downsize, yet another one of her adult children decided to move back in. It was a time of transition for all of us, and in retrospect, it was a precious gift that I got to break in my mom's new home with her. We got to start off right away with new memories and our new home, but it was hard being so close to our old home, our real home, as it often felt. Twice I woke early to drive my mom to work before dawn and drove home groggy, parked my car, went to get out, only to snap into reality and realize I had pulled into the driveway of my old house. My muscle memory was so strong that I had gotten all the way into the driveway before I realized I no longer lived there. It absolutely broke my heart both times. Many nights, my mother and I would go on walks and pass our old home. One of us would inevitably get irritated by some change they had made to the house. What the heck was that decoration in the yard? How dare they cut down that tree? I used to climb that tree. The house still felt so much like ours that it felt like an assault to watch it change before our very eyes. By this point in my life, I had been to 6 continents, lived all over the world, made homes in countries and terrains that were entirely foreign to me. I had gotten so used to moving and changing and creating a sense of belonging wherever I found myself. I had told myself that the place didn't matter as long as I had a loving, engaging, supportive community of people surrounding me. But here I was returning to my hometown after I said for years I never would, and feeling sorry for myself that someone else was calling my childhood home their own. After years of feeling like I could belong anywhere, feel at home anywhere, I could not feel at home 2 blocks away from this one particular house because so much of who I was as a person lived in that building. It felt like my entire being was housed there. The basement where we played for hours with our big tan dress-up box. The kitchen where I learned to make my mom's pumpkin chocolate chip muffins. The living room where I found out my parents would be getting divorced. The banister we'd slide down when Mom wasn't looking. The bedroom where I would sit up late at night and write, waiting for my mom to fall asleep so I could sneak out to spend time with my friends. The driveway where I was standing when I learned my father had passed away. It felt like every important thing that had ever happened to me had happened there, and it was so hard to separate those memories from that place. My mother's brother still lives in the house she grew up in, and my father's brother lives in their childhood home too. I treasured going to those homes as a child and hearing my parents tell me stories about their lives there. It felt like a magical portal into who they used to be and where they came from. It felt powerful to sleep in the bedroom my mom used to sleep in when she was a kid like me. And while my future children may never have the chance to sleep in my old bedroom, I imagine that if 10 years from now I ring the doorbell to that home, the new owners would gladly welcome me in to give my children a tour of where I grew up, just like my partner and I would if we were to receive such a request at the house we just bought. Because love lives on in places long after we've moved on, and the memories will belong to us whether or not the place still does.
I love rocks. In the robe that I wear to preach, I carry one rock in each pocket. One is the rock that was given to me from the church that ordained me as a gift from the church's children. And the other is a rock given to me by the children of this church at my installation. In his 1949 Land Ethic, Aldo Leopold wrote, "All ethics rest upon a single premise, that the individual is a member of a community of independent parts. The person's instinct prompts them to compete for their place in the community, but the person's ethics prompts them to cooperate. The land ethic simply enlarges the boundaries of the community to include the soils, the waters, the plants, and animals, or collectively, the land." I traveled to Door County for the first time in 2015. I know I'm a little late to the party on that one. I grew up in Racine, but our family's regular vacation spot was the Wisconsin Dells. I love Lake Michigan, though, that water that built my body, so I decided to make my own journey to the tip of where the land meets the lake. While I was there, I fell in love with Cave Point, which is on the eastern lake side of Door County. Door County is a peninsula, which is known as a cuesta. It's a particular type of land formation that has a sharp cliff on one side and a gradual slope on the other. At Cave Point, on that sharp cliff side, you can see beautiful rocky cliffs falling off into the lake. On windy days, the lake crashes against those cliffs at the edge of the land, the power of water shaping rock over centuries. I hiked on the edge of that meeting between land and lake, walking along rock that was formed over 400 million years ago, when Wisconsin was located along the equator. The path wove in and out of the tree line. Sometimes it was on rocky shore right next to the lake, and sometimes it was on pine needle root-covered earth, dappled with sunlight whispering through tree leaves. I took one turn out of a section of trees, and I suddenly found myself in a field of cairns. A cairn is a stack of rocks. For thousands of years, people have used cairns to mark important locations, landmarks or grave sites or pathways. People have used cairns to say, "This is the way forward. We were here," or "This is a sacred place of great beauty." Cairn is a Scottish word, and there's an old Scottish Gaelic blessing that blesses by saying, "I'll put a stone on your stone." At Cave Point, hundreds of cairns are stacked together in the outermost point of the land jutting into the water. Cairns of all sizes, tiny cairns that were smaller than my hand and huge cairns that were taller than I was. When I turned that corner and I was suddenly in hundreds of cairns, marking space and time, I was stunned into silence. Here were human-balanced rocks, formed millennia ago in geologic time, but now carefully balanced against one another, marking a single moment in the whisper of a human life. Each cairn represented a person, someone who made the choice and took the time to carefully stack these rocks, making some sort of meaning for themselves, bridging with place and beauty, intersecting flesh and stone and water. I shivered with awe, and I felt suspended in time and space there at the edge of land and lake, hovering above, but also poignantly aware of my own small life in the vast interconnected web of all that is. In that moment, I felt not only like I belonged in this land, but that I belonged to it. That I was part of this land, part of this larger web of life and time and rock and humanity and history. Later that year, I made my ministry website, which congregations in search of a minister view. Coming from Wisconsin, my body made by and belonging to this place, I chose a photo of a cairn as the background for my website to represent the intersection of land and water and earth and time and natural beauty and human art that I felt in that moment on Cave Point. Now, you all know a little bit how this story goes. Your search committee viewed my website and after several interviews and a nice long process, chose me as your candidate for senior ministry in 2016, and I came to meet you all in April and May of that year. One of the very first people that I met outside of the search committee was your then president of the board, Dale Skaggs. And the first time we talked, Dale told me how much he loved my website. Then he told me that his own Facebook cover photo was an image of cairns from one of his favorite places in the world, Cave Point. It suddenly felt to me like all the stars were aligned and I was meant to come home to you, my people, who share a love of this land with me. Many of us were even made by this land, formed by its water, our bodies fed by local harvests, our cells built by Lake Michigan, minds shaped by this particular intersection of earth and water and sky. In her poem entitled, "All Your Enemies Will Be Vanquished," the first Native American poet laureate of the United States, Joy Harjo, writes, "The place and time of our first breath, our agreement to be here, sets the tone for the rest of the journey. There is a shape to this agreement that is based on the place we stand on the earth. And we begin a relationship that intimately involves this time and place. The ripple of the path is shaped by that vulnerable and powerful moment of first becoming human. It can be mapped." What is the map of your life? When did it begin? How did the tender moment you were born shape your life's agreement? And how are you twined in that time and that place? Our congregation's origin story begins on August 18th of 1841, when a newspaper advertisement wrote, "All those who are friendly to the organization of a Unitarian congregation are requested to meet in Rogers Building at early candlelight." The founders of our congregation gathered there that night, beginning a journey whose winding trail led to you all here now. Our founders became a congregation together in 1842, 6 years before Wisconsin was officially a state and 4 years before Milwaukee was chartered as a city. At the time that our founders first gathered, Milwaukee was simply known as Solomon Juneau's Trading Post. Solomon Juneau was a French fur trader who was married to a Menominee woman named Josette. Josette ran the trading post while Solomon was frequently away on business. But before that, before Milwaukee became a city, in the mid-1700s, this land was populated by Potawatomi and Ho-Chunk and Menominee villages, with significant minorities of Ottawa and Ojibwa and Sauk peoples, according to Antonio Dockstader and Renee Zakar's American Indians in Milwaukee. But then, over the course of the first half of the 1800s, those Indian people living here were forcibly removed by federal policy and by a series of land cessation treaties. One of the major treaties that removed Indian nations from the Milwaukee area was signed in 1833 by representatives from the Potawatomi, Ottawa, and Ojibwe nations. In that Treaty of Chicago, those folks lost all the land west of Lake Michigan all the way up to Lake Winnebago, which is today known as Wisconsin, as part of the federal government's policy at the time to move all Native peoples west of the Mississippi River. The Menominee, Ho-Chunk, and Oneida nations lost their lands in a series of other treaties, including an important one at Prairie du Chien. Between 1825 and 1850, the Native people who had lived on this land for centuries and even thousands of years were forcibly removed from it. Some folks chose to relocate to reservations west of the Mississippi. Some chose to flee into northern Wisconsin. And some tried to remain in their homes. Many people died in the long and cold and hungry journeys west. They lost access to secure sources of food and clean water, to their homes, and to anything they could not carry. In the book Braiding Sweetgrass, the Potawatomi woman Robin Wall Kimmerer writes, "To our people, land was everything. Identity, the connection to our ancestors, the home of our non-human kinfolk, our pharmacy, our library, the source of all that sustained us." This story is part of our congregation's story. We were founded as a congregation just after the Federal Indian Removal Act was passed in 1830. And the local Treaty of Chicago was signed in 1833. Our story begins in the midst of the government's process of removing Native people from the land that we live on. We, as a congregation, are intertwined with that history. It is part of us, and we are part of it. Last Wednesday, Governor Evers designated the second Monday of each October as Indigenous Peoples Day. Tomorrow will be the first ever officially recognized Wisconsin Indigenous Peoples Day, which Evers says was in order to recognize that Wisconsin would not be all that it is without Indigenous people. One of the ways to recognize this and to honor Indigenous people is to realize that the land's history does not start at the moment that Europeans arrived in it. The land is much, much older than that and has deep and long-standing relationships with many different peoples. Anthropologists estimate that humans have occupied the Great Lakes area for at least 12,000 years. There are cave paintings in Wisconsin of Ho-Chunk stories that date to 1,000 years ago, and pottery shards of the effigy mound builders from 3,000 years ago, according to Patty Lowe's History in Indian Nations of Wisconsin. Just as our histories are built into our bodies, so too does the land keep the history of all that happens upon it. This land contains scars as well as beauty, graveyards as well as birthing pools. We need to be willing to tell all the stories of the land if we are to truly know our own story, if we are to truly understand our role and our place in the web of life. Genuine curiosity about our land and our history can lead to a deeper understanding of this place that made us, and even to a deeper sense of belonging to and relationship with all that is. When I returned to Cave Point this summer, there were signs up posted warning against stacking rocks. I learned that people were stacking so many rocks that they had begun removing huge stones from the land, leaving roots of trees exposed to rising waters. And some people had begun taking the cairns home, large numbers of them, which was contributing to the erosion of the land and thereby displacing the animals that lived within it. Robin Wall Kimmerer writes that in Indigenous ways of knowing, the land belongs to itself, as do the plants and the animals, and yes, even the rocks. Human beings must ask permission to take an animal's life, or a plant's fruit, or to move a rock, because we are in relationship with them and they belong to themselves. We human beings are part of a larger community of being, and to be in right relationship with the larger community of Aldo Leopold's land ethic, we cannot just take and control and possess. I still love cairns. And my Irish blood will still bless by saying, I will put a rock on top of your rock. I also believe that I belong to this place, that I belong to this land and this water that made me. And because of that belonging, I want to learn how to cooperate with the larger community. Before we stack a rock or throw a stone in the water, we should ask its permission. We should pay attention to the larger web of life that includes the rock and the water and all the beings that the rock and the water affect. How do our actions ripple out? How are we affecting the life that is all around us? We are one part of the larger web, and we can choose to cooperate with that web, noticing how every choice we make affects all that is. May we learn how to listen and cooperate with the entire community around us, and also with the people and the beings and the land that came before us and will come after us, an enormously full circle of family. All of our relations, all the spirits gathered together around the sacred fire to tell all of the stories. May it be so.